Yeah, I would like to welcome Theresia Niedermüller. I would like to welcome Ralf Gleis. I would like to welcome you. Welcome to mumok. I'm very happy that we have a very exciting event tonight. The set, the double, the stand-in, the prop, Jann Haworth in conversation with Jo Applin. It's a pleasure for me to welcome Jann Haworth, her daughter Liberty Blake, and Jo Applin. Welcome. I'm so happy that you make the big tour to the long tour to Vienna, and I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome to mumok. I'm very delighted that the directors of the Austrian Ludwig Foundation, Bettina Brunner and Silvia Tuska, had the idea to initiate a talk with the artist Jann Haworth and the art historian Jo Applin. Since the Austrian Ludwig Foundation has been established in 1981, it has been possible to continually expand our collection through permanent loans from the foundation with key works from the 60s and 70s right up to contemporary positions. I'm particularly proud that my team and I have been able to expand our male-dominated collections with works by female artists, and I'm extremely happy that we received Jann Haworth's Snake Lady on permanent loan from the Austrian Foundation, Ludwig Foundation in 2021, which you can see in our show Mapping the 60s until Sunday evening. I would especially express my thanks to Manuela Ammer, who discovered the Snake Lady and who made the proposal to the Austrian Ludwig Foundation to purchase it. Thank you very much. With another sculpture of Jann Haworth, the artist, we have another guest tonight. Welcome. I would like to extend a warm welcome to Nick Treadwell. Thank you very much for lending us this wonderful sculpture for tonight. I wish you a wonderful and interesting evening at mumok, and I give the word to Bettina Brunner. Thank you very much.
Hello and good evening. Thank you so much, Carola. You already said lots of things I was going to say as well, so I might have to skip those. Thank you all for coming to join us tonight. I'm the managing director of the Austrian Ludwig Foundation, and we're really happy to be able to organize this event here at mumok tonight, the conversation between artist Jann Haworth and art historian Jo Applin. And as was already mentioned by Carola, I'd really like to welcome also a special guest in the audience, Liberty Blake, an artist who also happens to be the daughter of Jann Haworth. And Liberty and Jann have together organized a workshop yesterday here at mumok, a printing workshop, as part of their work in progress mural project. And it was really an incredible event. I had the opportunity to take part as well, and they worked with members of the Verein Nachbarinnen, who are frequent partners of the mumok's education program. So thank you so much, Jann and Liberty, for organizing this. It was a real joy. Okay, I also have to say quite a few thank yous. First of all, of course, to our host tonight, mumok's director, Carola Kraus, who very sadly will be leaving the museum after 15 years at the end of the month. So thank you so much for having us and for all those years of working together between the mumok and the foundation. It was wonderful. Okay. I also have to thank quite a few of mumok's team members who have supported us on this event, from press and marketing, Martina Kuso and Katharina Murschetz, Also from the events team, Victoria, Masha, and of course I also want to introduce our technician tonight, Wolfgang Konrad, who's up there, and I know he's going to do a marvelous job because he always does. And the education department, of course, yesterday preparing the workshop, that was Lena Ahrens, Marie-Therese Gamhoff, and Marie-Therese Hochwartner. And finally, thanking my colleagues at the foundation, Silvia Tutschka and Eva Walser, and of course also the foundation's support board for their continuing support, chaired by Theresia Niedermüller, who I'd also like to welcome here, as well as our board member Gabriele Shaw, who I think is also here somewhere. Hi Gabriele, thanks for coming. As Carola Kraus already mentioned, the foundation has provided funds to acquire Jann Haworth's soft sculpture Snake Lady in 2021, which is now on permanent loan to the museum. The connection between the museum and the Austrian Ludwig Foundation, however, goes back much further to 1981, when the foundation was established by German collectors Peter and Irene Ludwig and the Austrian state in order to bring international contemporary art to Austria. The Ludwigs donated about 230 artworks from their private collection, including key works of American pop art, to the foundation, which are all on loan to mumok. So they are today part of the museum's collection. Above all, over the last 40 plus years, the foundation supported public museums in Vienna, mumok as well as others, through regular acquisitions of artworks, which are now on permanent loan in the museum's collections. And this is continued until this day, which we're very happy about. With the support of the foundation, mumok and its director, Carola Kraus, made a concerted effort to include more female artists in the museum's collection, including those associated with the pop art movement. So this is why the work of Jann Haworth is here at the museum, as Carola already said, suggested by mumok's chief curator, Manuela Ammer, who I know is also a big fan of Jann's work, as well as works by artists such as Sina Hansen, Evelyn Axel, and Kiki Kogelnik. Altogether, there are about 600 works at mumok on permanent loan from the foundation, and about 400 more in other public museums, especially the Albertina. And I'd like to welcome Albertina's General Director, Ralf Gleis, who is with us this evening. And there are also works on loan to the Belvedere and the MUG. Just a little bit of background maybe to this event and how it figures within the sort of foundation's activities. Over the last year, I worked with a group of academic advisors on the concept of a research season to engage with some of these more recent acquisitions by the foundation. And I'd like to thank the advisory group for the incredibly helpful conversations we had. It included tonight's guest, Jo Applin, as well as Ana Gonçalves Magalhães, Christian Leclerc, Tina Post, Barbara Reisinger, Mike Spellinger, and Alina Williams. And also welcome to Barbara, who is also here tonight. And also to Hannah Bruckmüller, who I would like to thank for her feedback on the early stages of this project. Through a research and travel grant, as well as events and commissioned writing on our website, you can already find our first texts in the collection notes series online. And beyond, the foundation is looking more closely at a number of recently acquired artworks and the respective artists' practices over the next year and a half, activities which are planned in order to complement the work the museums are doing themselves, as this one here, which aligns with the Mapping the 60s exhibition. So this evening is the beginning of something to be continued in the future here and hopefully also in and with other museums. And we are already planning another event, a symposium at mumok on the 31st of January, which will look into the works of Rosemary and Lee Castoro and Lee Lozano, which are on loan to MUG and mumok. So please come back for that. And finally, I would like to welcome and introduce tonight's guests, Jann Haworth and Jo Applin. We are so delighted that you followed our invitation, especially Jann, who had to travel a very long way. She lives in Utah, so you can imagine that was a long trip. So thank you so much for being here. And I will finish off with a few biographical notes. Jann Haworth was born in California as the daughter of an Oscar-winning Hollywood art director father and an artist mother. She attended UCLA, the Slade School of Fine Art, and the Courtauld Institute in London. Jann has worked as an artist and educator since the 1960s, both in the UK and US. Relocating from California to London in 1961, and she lived in the UK until, I think, 1997. She developed her art practice working with fabric, vinyl, and other non-fine arts materials to create her soft sculptures. and she's today recognized as a key member of the British pop art movement. Since 1997, Jann and Liberty Blake have collaborated on a number of educational projects, as well as the Work in Progress mural that was mentioned earlier. Jann's work has been shown in group and solo exhibitions since the 1960s, including Tate Britain, the Pallant House Gallery in the UK, the Louis Vuitton Foundation in Paris, here at Mumok, of course, and also at Kunsthalle, Vienna, as part of the group exhibition Power Up on Women in Pop Art, curated by Angela Stief in 2010. Her works are represented in international collections such as Ludwig Forum Aachen, Tate Britain, the Hirshhorn Museum and the Walker Art Center in the US, and of course here at Mumok. And I also want to mention another work by Jann that was already introduced here by Carola, the artist from 2003 or 4, not entirely sure. And I also want to welcome Nick Treadwell, who has provided a home for Jann's sculpture in his apartment in Vienna for, I think, almost 20 years, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you so much, Nick, for helping us to get it here, for joining us tonight. And also thanks to Jann for repairing the sculpture's ankle this morning. So it was an interesting experience. Our other guest tonight is Jo Applin, Walter H. Annenberg Professor in the History of Art at the Courtauld in London. She is an editor of Oxford Art Journal and the author of numerous articles as well as several publications, including Lee Lozano Not Working from 2018, Eccentric Objects, Rethinking Sculpture in 1960s America from 2012, and Yayoi Kusama, Infinity Mirror Room, also from 2012. She also curated the exhibition Abstract Erotic, Louise Bourgeois, Eva Hesse, Alice Adams, which is on view now at the Courtauld Gallery in London until September 14. Jo is currently writing about art and aging since the 1960s, where she also discusses Jann Haworth's soft sculptures. So that's it from me. Thanks again to everyone for coming, and please give a very warm welcome to our guests tonight.
Thank you so much, Bettina. Thank you, everybody. It is always a delight to be here, and it's always a delight for me to be back in conversation with Jann. We've been talking together for a number of years now, in person, and then obviously with COVID, and since then online. And for us to be back together is really wonderful. We first met in person at Pallant House, where Jann had a show a few years ago. I wrote a review of that show, and it was at the press view that we had a conversation, and Jann told me that she had studied at the Courtauld Institute of Art in the 1960s, which I hadn't known, and this was something that was very exciting for me to learn, and also for the Courtauld as well to kind of be aware of. And so we've been talking about all kinds of things, and I think some of those things will come across in our conversation. We aren't just going to do kind of too much of a chronological kind of plod through the career. We're going to think about different transition moments, themes, threads that run through and connect, moments where there's perhaps a transition or a hinge, as Jann puts it. And you'll see from the title of our conversation, there's lots of themes that we're going to be covering this evening. We'll move back and forth. We have some slides to look at. We should start with perhaps the one that we are looking at. This is the snake lady, Jann. We have this image, this really beautiful close-up photograph of that terracotta face, and we also have her in all her glory here. Do you want to just maybe tell us a bit about the snake lady and how she came to be?
Yeah, it really came out of having, is this on? Are you hearing me back there? Yeah. It came out of a trip to Amsterdam that I came across a lot of literature that was suddenly out of copyright and published by Ballantine Books, and became absolutely fascinated in a run of books that were sort of oriented to fantasy literature, but very distinguished writers of that craft. And I think late in the 60s, the art and clothing and style took a big turn. It became much more decorative. And so the pieces that I was working on at that time for a show in New York at Sydney Chanis sort of went off in a different direction for me, and the snake lady and another figure called the sorceress were part of that. And I think we'll unpack this as we go, but the thing that has always appealed to me is working in materials that are marginally unacceptable. In other words, they take up the edge of art and aren't necessarily considered to be the materials you're supposed to work in. That I like those slightly unused fabrics and things like that, cardboard and plastics and that sort of thing. They offer new opportunities because they've not been used that much in fine art. But also, for me, I've never liked bronze sculpture. I wanted sculptures to relax and sit in a chair, or to be movable, to be animated. So many of the things have that kind of component. And I think also for the sculptural things, it's not necessarily set that they will be in a particular position or in a particular place, or that they will be on a plinth. I like the idea that they occupy the same space as the viewer, so that the viewer is in an equal position to the sculpture. It's not separated by a base or a case or so forth. And that does give curators and conservators a headache, though. So, please interrupt us if you have a question as we go along. I really do like to have a dialogue. I know it's sort of harder for the audience than it is for us, but if
we'll
you want
make time
to
at the end as well if you want to save them up, but just wave or shout. Jann, can you just talk us through some of the materials, this lurch between high and low fine art and I suppose what got classed as craft at a certain moment. What are we dealing with here with Snake Lady?
Well, the Snake Lady, I started with the feet. So I started with the shoes up because I was down Portobello Road, which is a market in London, and I saw these amazing kind of 1940s platform snakeskin shoes. And I knew I wanted to do a Medusa. But a Medusa that was contemporary. So it was just like, snap, there she is. She's going to rise up out of the shoes. And then I began to collect snakeskin fabrics, and then think about, whether the snake scales would be of her body would be cut out, or how I would do that. So it has vinyl. And for the snake scales, and then different fabrics that were, products of the time from different countries, I suppose. And then terracotta head, which is in the kind of tradition of the China doll of the Victorian period. And then, of course, real shoes, and then a kind of beaded snake that I also found down at the market that's sort of surrounding her face. And it's as if she's been... she's dominated the snake, but she's also swallowed by it. So it's a kind of combination of an enigmatic combination of, is she, harmed by it, or we know that snakes take on the shape of a goat, if they swallow one. So it's something about that, that she's both in command, but she's also been kind of incorporated into the snake. So.
And there is something mythical and kind of magisterial. I mean, neither of us are particularly tall, but she certainly towers over us in a way that, in a way that your others feel more. I mean, it's a question of scale, and she is on a slightly larger than life scale, whereas some of those other sculptures made just in the years preceding this, and the sorceress who we've got coming up, were of a more life-size scale. Should we have a look at, we can move back and forth. We have here your old lady, one really nicely juxtaposed here with another work which you can tell us about, but just as a reminder that the earliest works that Jann makes when she comes to London is this extraordinary cast of characters in cloth, which is unlike anything anyone is making at that time really in London. They're figurative, they are soft, they are not what anyone else in the studios of the art school are doing at that time. Tell us a bit about what happens. You've arrived in London in 1961. Yeah,
I mean, to speak to the kind of hinge point, I'm coming in as a 19-year-old American to a very, very different society. And I was alone, and one of the thoughts that occurred to me that it would be good to make some family members. So I decided to make a grandmother. It's modeled on my great-grandmother, Alice May Fifield, who was a seamstress. And she earned her living solo because her husband died as a seamstress, so it's kind of generational to sew. But the idea really was that, you know, that skin and fabric are very similar. And as a 19-year-old, I felt that no one should look at an older lady and think that the sort of marked face, the older face, should be something that was disagreeable. And I felt that if I brought color to it and did quilting, it could be like the story of her life, because older ladies often make quilts, and the patches that are in the quilts relate to the things that have happened, a vest from a husband, or a ball gown, or a nightgown that is part of the story. It's very like a comic strip of the life, only in fabric. And so I wanted her face to reflect that, but I also wanted the sedentary nature of a person who is older as a piece of furniture, or in a more sedentary kind of position. So the chair is actually the armature, so the front legs of the chair are her legs, and her hands are resting in the lap of the chair, so it takes on that kind of
So if you were to sit down, you would obscure her completely, wouldn't you?
Yes. Yeah. So she's the earliest figure, life-size figure that I made. I was still a student at the Slade, and they kind of didn't know what to do with me, really, because I was making sculpture in the painting department and things like that. And she was rejected from the first exhibition she was in. She later appeared on the cover of Sgt. Pepper over on the right-hand side. So the end product of this, I thought was going to be joyous, and people who saw it said it looked like Psycho, and they were terrified of it, and I was sort of, this is really happy, and the rest of it. So I'm not sure that I accomplished my purpose, but she's still about. And
but there was something. I mean, it was not bad timing, because Psycho's 1960. This is, I think, 63 or
no,
2
it's
or
62.
62.
Yeah.
And so this idea, and what I find so interesting is this. I mean, that you're this young student in London, you've come from California, and you're making these touching, sort of drab seeming older people at a time where it's meant to be the youth revolution, right? This is 60s, swinging 60s, and then you arrive, and these are the figures that you make, and there's a couple of others, and so this is fascinating. And as you say, it appears she's on the cover, she's kind of hiding in plain sight in the front row of Sgt. Pepper, and it's just this wonderful kind of intrusion of old age into this kind of cast of characters. But she's slightly covered, isn't she, by a sort of an oversized Shirley Temple doll on her lap.
Temple figure, which I put on her lap in the Sgt. Pepper. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's sort of it's a happy and a sad figure.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that I accomplished for me what I needed to do. But I think, yeah, she's a good presence in my career.
And there is another one, I'm not sure that we have her, Old Lady 1 and 2, and what always strikes me is that there is a third old figure, and Frank, and he's the only one that has a name, so the women you kind of just numbered. Was that a deliberate kind of comment
just
on...
lady.
Just another old lady.
You know, kind of...
Whereas we have Frank, who I think we have a picture of you with him, but let's just look a little at some of these other works that you are making at this time, because these would sometimes accompany her.
I do series of things, because once I think of a form for an idea, I can think of lots of things that could be done with that. So I've done corsets. I've done a lot of corsets. And I continue to make old ladies. Every so often I make another old lady. And the donuts are just it's a kind of place you can put a lot of ideas. So I've done designs for a theater production, and I made donuts out of the fabrics and things I used for that. I've done the art history of donuts, which is as if looking at different periods of time. So Cubism is a square donut. Yeah. And I keep asking art historians to please do this as a test.
This should be our first year entry-level test.
Yeah, exactly. How many of those art movements can you name? I'm sure everybody in the room can name all of them, but that wouldn't be true in many entry-level.
I don't think so. No, it would not. No, absolutely.
Anyway, but it makes me laugh. And you know, there is for me, a lot of things that strike me as funny. I don't know if it strikes anybody else as funny, but I think it's just so ridiculous, the thought of biting into a cloth donut. I mean, and the other thing of saying that what would the flavor of a red and white striped donut be, or what would the flavor of I don't know, a tartan donut be? Would it be haggis or something like that? So.
But the fact that you were making donuts, so when I first began to teach your work to my students years ago, I would just describe these as biscuits. And this is this interesting Anglo-American difference, because you're young American in the UK, we wouldn't really have donuts. You'd have them at the seaside, but this isn't what you would have with a cup of tea, which Jann then told me was a cup of coffee, which you also probably wouldn't be having at home in 1962 in England.
No, not really.
And so there's this kind of really interesting clash of cultures. And for me, it's just also so kind of classed in a way, you know, when you would see them in this sort of sitting room. And so that was always just something I've often thought of, donuts and coffee. It's not quite a cup of tea.
Well, there's an absurdity to it. You know, and I suppose I think kind of, I'm not, you know, I shouldn't saw off the branch I'm sitting on, but am I really a pop artist, do you think? I haven't decided if I am.
It becomes a less useful term every time we expand that canon of whatever pop was supposed to be in New York at a certain point. It's becoming just kind of a placeholder, isn't it, for something else. I think so many of the works that we see upstairs here in Mapping the 60s as well, it's like this expansion.
It breaks the rules.
It does, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And it was called Neo-Dada to begin with, wasn't it? You know, and I think maybe that fits better in some ways.
And there's many pop artists that, I mean, in a way, it's the art historians and the curators' fault. Artists never want the labels that we apply, right? Then, of course, I'm not a pop artist. I'm not a minimalist.
I just was going to point out, one of the starting points for this one was Marat Oppenheim's fur teacup, because I wanted to make a fur donut to go with it. Who could resist the idea of a fur donut? You know, and cross-references.
I mean, art history is there, isn't it? It's a thread through your work that we see these references. I think we meet Picasso later on, Marat Oppenheim to Picasso.
So this is the Pom-Pom Girl, and it's autobiographical. I did have the opportunity when I was first in London really to kind of catch up with some of the imagery that was my teen years. So, and I like the idea of this sort of suspended figure as a thing on a wall. She's jumping, or is she screaming? So it's a kind of, has a double edge.
Yeah, like the old lady, right? You're not quite sure, which way to. This is from, do you remember what year this is one of the...
Oh, it'll be 64 or something like that. Yeah.
And this is all white, and that's an interesting moment with your soft sculpture. We have... let me just jump forward a couple to another one of your kind of monochrome works, your rodeo cowboy. And so this and the pom-pom girl are both all white.
And so some of the charm bracelets are all one color.
Indeed,
yeah. And so it's casting in canvas, basically. I mean, I saw the work as not casting in bronze, but casting in cloth. And the idea of all white, for me, it did not come from Klaus Oldenburg. It was... dual invented, I guess, at the same time. The idea really was from the Body Snatchers. My father did the production design of the Body Snatchers, and so seeing the figures, the replicants of Dana Winters and Kevin McCarthy, in latex, and the way that the plaster shops would recreate people and so forth. So most of my work has a thread of the film industry in it, and it's the behind-scenes film industry in many ways. The stuntmen, the stand-ins, the set, the back of the set. And that's why Sgt. Pepper is a life-size set, because I wanted the Beatles to be able to walk into it as an actual place to go rather than a collage. So the thing of the white cowboy is it's cast in one color like bronze, but it's soft fabric. So,
and he has this kind of amazing slouch. He leans against the object leans against a wall and has this kind of slouch. And I think technically these works, like the surfer. here, where we see this is the skinned surfer. This is before he's got his bronzed, tanned outer layer added. But there is something about physically, like the technique of making these objects. They're not just stuffed, right? They have armatures in there.
Some I've only done muscle work once because it was enough. But so this one's in the Ludwig collection as well, but with his skin on.
So we didn't include this one. He's a blonde, bronzed Californian surfer.
I kind of was having, the people not in my life, like who wouldn't want to have a cowboy? I mean, it's part of your life. It's the hat. It's all about the hat.
Am I going the wrong way? Yes. Here is this is
That's
Frank. So there's a kind of this trio of old people that Jann makes in the first two in close succession, and then Old Lady 2 comes a few years later. Where are we here? Where is this? Where have you placed him?
This is in a garden in London, and Frank was a more realistic turn away from the Old Lady, but I put them as a couple. I showed them in the ICA in 1963, and I made a set for them to sit in. So it was like a room, a fake room with these two characters and the donuts and a dog and various other things that occupied that space. So it was, again, not on a plinth. It was a room, but a fake room with quasi real people.
So this is too soon to be calling it things like installation. For you're thinking about the cinematic set at this point.
Yeah.
And the reception of this at the time was...
it was good. I mean, and I think, the figures themselves were rejected from the young contemporaries, but the ICA picked up on the work, and it was an exhibition called For Young Painters, and I was a painting student at Slade, but I was making sculpture, but I still got in.
And that problem at first was formally what to call these, and I think in the end they were classed as kind of expanded painting or some, under what category you replaced these soft figurative works, and so they were successful when they were finally shown. And at that point you have your first show with Robert Fraser in 1966, is that right? So this is... it's just such an important gallery at that moment in time.
Yeah, Robert was very eccentric, and I think the gallery cut through so many things. He had an amazing eye for picking different artists, and the artists within the kind of gallery, his gallery, were radically different one from another. You had Harold Cohen and Derek Bosher and Peter Blake, my husband at the time, and who else? Nick Monroe, and not to forget Nick Monroe. If you don't know his work, it's spectacular, and he disappeared from sight, really. So it was a very interesting gallery collection of individuals. And he showed Yoko Ono and John working together on a piece. So,
And so at this point, so you've graduated at this point, that you are suddenly then kind of plunged into this very kind of swinging 60s scene of works. And of course there was, it's through Robert Fraser, I think, that the deals with Apple Records were struck, right? Richard Hamilton does the White Album the year after you, or there's a couple of others. So there's a moment where music and fashion and art are kind of beginning to overlap.
It's interesting. Just briefly, my theory of the 60s is really that the playwrights set the stage for a more sort of ordinary voice, a kind of, maybe not such a hierarchical point of view of art and correct art and good art and so forth. And the playwrights, Wesker, Osborne, Beckett, that sort of turned everything over after the war. And in a way, we give such great credit to the Beatles or the musicians or something. And I don't think that's correct. I think that they had a stage prepared for them by, Beyond the Fringe and theatrical performances like that they could walk out onto with great confidence. So it was a proliferation, a post-war, sort of explosion of culture in every way, really supported by technology in terms of magazine, showing work in a way that hadn't ever, color reproduction hadn't really been, active until that point. So that's very important, that those sort of communication systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And of course, the musicians are looking to the art world, and they're coming to you. As usual, we are, of course, very behind on all the images we wanted to talk about, so then we will go at quite a clip at a certain point. But here's one of those those large charm bracelets, which
so it's about 9 feet long, and it just, the idea of doing a chain in cloth, I just thought was hilarious. So I wanted to do that, so I've done about 4 or 5 of those.
And like jewels and things, and we have some in Tate Britain, which and so this is kind of Alice in Wonderland moment, because the scale,
it makes the viewer tiny again.
Yeah. So. And it makes them abstract for a moment, because you don't know what you're looking at. This isn't, it takes a second to click that what you're seeing here is...
This is a little bit like a 3-dimensional comic book, because it's all the holidays that I had as a child with my family. So it's like, memorabilia from that, but it's also a narrative. So.
And here we have...
That's the beads, and that's in the Tate.
Yes, this is the Tate piece. Here is the sorceress you mentioned earlier. This is you wearing... Tell us what's happening in this photograph. There's a lot going on here. Tell us what's...
I want to say the Triennale in Venice for architecture. Alison and Peter Smithson, who were brutalist architects in the 60s. I knew them, and they commissioned a piece that they said, can you do us something that's about the baptistry in Florence? And so I did a cloak that was based on the baptistry. And then at that time I was doing various cloaks. So these are 3 cloaks. I suddenly found material that I could make a big drawing and then translate that into a 3-dimensional surface. So it was a real breakthrough for my work to be able to kind of draw and then make something from that, but draw very freely instead of being kind of bound by a geometric quilt making process.
But the quilting is still here, right? But now in 3 dimensions. Yes. So that's another kind of thread that runs through.
Sorceress, and she's really the companion piece to the snake lady.
Yes. Of similarly kind of statuesque size.
Yeah. And she has my mother's nose.
Is this a terracotta face as well?
Yes, it is. So it's the doll again, the doll revisited.
And we're moving forward in time, but this was a surprise to me. I hadn't seen this image before. Every time we talk, I learn something new. I should be writing everything down. Or you show me another image, and then, I've been making old ladies off and on. And then you sent me some of those images recently, and then you sent me a clown. So tell us what is this?
I was commissioned by Madame Tussauds to do various pieces for them. I did a 48-foot giant for them when I was pregnant with Libby. And then I also did this for the Amsterdam Tussauds, and just loved the idea of knit balloons because it's so absurd because they're full of holes. So, and I did Kropotkin and a Cavoutus, and there's a gnome in Dutch. And, so Tussauds work, this is a Tussauds piece, and this one has a tapestry face. It's another process that I feel I invented that I don't ever think I've seen a 3-dimensional tapestry before. And what I would do is make a clay face and then cut a pattern off the face that I'd made, and then sew all those bits together and then embroider that. I've made several of those kinds of works. So the next one is that.
We have. There we go.
Yeah.
Are you making the tapestry yourself?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So and this one was sort of overlaying a house with a clown makeup and that sort of feeling of the mind trapped. It was also referencing the titles of an 007 film where you project image on the face, and I thought that was such a good idea to be able to have the face be a reflection of something that might be in the mind, so something that you're thinking could be what the face, looked like. It's something I would really like to do more of, but haven't really. It takes a long time.
But working with these, so interesting, these kind of high and low materials and this idea, the question of craft doesn't really seem to have been sort of levelled at your work, because there was a point, around mid-century and into the 60s where this was territory you didn't want to be siloed into, particularly if you're a woman artist, right? You're just, this is craft, it's not fine art.
Yeah.
You somehow seem to have found a route through that. So the ICA is showing your soft stuffed figures, you're working with tapestry and so on. You talk about this not in a kind of, it's just what women do, but you talk about it in quite an empowered way. I was taught how to stitch by my mother. This is my grandmother and so on. So were you thinking this is something that women would do?
Well, yes, but it was very natural to me. I like the soft, yielding, warm idea rather than the hard cast metal that keeps you away. I want the things to be touched. It's like, keeping my hands off them is really hard. But I think, the idea of, the feminine side of it is just, that's how it was, and so, there are points and points within that, but I think, it'd be interesting to talk about.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. So we are going to take a bit of a leap, I think, now, in chronologically. Why not? We are going to talk about another group. So let me move on to these. And perhaps you can just talk us through. It takes a minute to kind of, these are, it just helps seeing these. I know we always say you need to see it. It does help seeing these in a way to work out what you're looking at. So can you just give us a brief description of what we're
I tend to go too fast over how it's actually made, so I'll try to slow down on it. But it is, I do a drawing of something that I'm interested in. In this case, we're going through some corsets, and the drawing then I think about the color, but the drawing's black and white, and I paint, I stretch and paint really big pieces of canvas very loosely with oil paint. And then go back to the drawing, and I cut the drawing up as a pattern and then sew it back together. In these works, I was fascinated by the fact that what I could do is a palimpsest. I could do layers, because if I put a transparent piece of vinyl, which is chintzy, cheap, kind of crappy material, next to really fine art, linen and so forth, I was still on that edge, and that's kind of, your former statement was a little bit about that. I'm not so sure that my work has actually been all that generously received in terms of the craft side of it, because I think it can present a problem, on various levels. But going, on these pictures, you can then have a backdrop like it's a play, or you can have shadow drops. You can light it severely and have almost a different painting, because you're creating shadows. So the person who owns it can change it. And as you walk by it, it's slightly animated. It moves. The composition changes because the front surface and the back surface are not, there's 2 inches between them. So that fascinated me, and I'm still fascinated by that idea that there's so many things you can do. It's like projection, like film, that you can do a black line on a surface of a vinyl, and it'll project on the back of the canvas. So there's, an infinity of things you can do with that double layering.
They feel three-dimensional, don't
yeah,
although ostensibly they hang on the wall, but they're relief forms.
So.
And we see these recurring motifs that come through. We see the polka dots. I skipped past the Minnie Mouse back here.
That is the Acid Queen's corset from Tommy, and I've done 2 productions of Tommy doing the costumes and sets, with Lib, some of it too. And then this is Minnie after her divorce and before she knew she was pregnant. And I did a bunch of Minnies. I couldn't let go of Minnie for a long time.
We can see traces of her remain. Okay, I'm moving us through here a little bit. So, okay, what are we?
Oh, this is a Western corset, so it's picking up on quilts and so forth. Let's jump to the next one, because that's Minnie as well. That's a Scandal. She's kind of paparazzi have caught her, and she's pregnant. So.
It's just kind of not quite Hollywood, but we're in the realm, aren't we, of the kind of the cinematic and the image in some way, and that's starting to come through in these works more so, like the material of film, like rather than the idea.
And with the film strips, and
of course, and the film strips that we start seeing. Maybe a suggestion of here, I don't know, with the kind of the strips in this work here.
These are more, the dancer is the Firebird, and this is Picasso. I did a series that were called Dreaming Painters, and the Dreaming Painters were as if they had died, and pieces that they were thinking about, little shards of their paintings in kind of film strip form. So there's 6 of these. It's Ray Johnson and Nevelson and Lee Krasner and Ray Johnson and Matisse, and then Picasso.
Yeah. And so we have Picasso here. Now this incorporates fabric with cardboard. Did we start to see
it's just straight. It's all fabric.
This is all fabric.
And I didn't know if this would work. I didn't know if I could stretch canvas and vinyl together. So it was a big experiment, and I thought maybe it would ripple all over the place and be horrid. And I didn't know if I could do curves to begin with curve on curve on curve. So the first ones are very straight, and then as they go on, I just keep pushing it further, because quilt doesn't usually do that. It's much more geometric. It doesn't do curves as much.
It's an unusual list of artists. Why did you pick those 6?
Oddly, the artists I was drawn to all did collage. I mean, you'll know the story of Lee Krasner tearing up Pollock's work after he died and making collages out of that. And some of her best work is that collage period. It's quite amazing work, I think.
So it's the theme of collage, about piecing together.
And I didn't know that when I started. I investigated all of them and then had to try to think in terms of some aspect of their work that I would then extend my process for. So with Ray Johnson, I knew he worked on little pieces of cardboard sometimes, and so I had to kind of think, well, cloth, cardboard, how do you do that? So I layered different canvases and glued them all together with rabbit skin glue and made little cardboard works that are on that.
But the selection, for me, it's kind of interesting because you've got Ray Johnson, who such an important artist, but really someone who was just not very known and was kind of on the margins of various different circles. And then you've got Picasso, and it kind of sums up in a way you don't care about that. That distinction between high and low. And Hannah Hawk, yes, of course, is in there. Yes.
This painting means a lot to me. It is not the beautiful nude, it's what happens to women. Various things happen to women that they don't know are going to happen to them. And so it's a nude, kind of beginning to expose that, to investigate, that side of the trajectory that women go through. So,
And we are, so we're moving into, this is one of the
we can go through
pieces.
these quickly. This is a series after the 217 March, the Women's March. I went on that with my other daughter, Daisy, and we were in Washington in our pink hats and protesting the 216 election. I apologize for America. I did want to say that this evening. And I was very interested in the fact that so much art had been created by people in their kitchens and so forth on cardboard. And so I started in on a whole bunch of cardboard pieces, which I'm still working on, other cardboard works. I love cardboard.
It's thick corrugated cardboard, isn't it? And use the ridges. And so these are sculptural, aren't they?
Yeah, conservators do not like cardboard so much, but I can't resist
It's too fragile?
Well, no, it changes color and things like that. This is a photograph of one of the first mural we did in Salt Lake. It's called SLC Pepper, and it's an apology for Sergeant Pepper. I wanted to make a mural that was 50% women and 50% men, and we worked with 33 people, mostly non-artists, in Salt Lake to create this mural, and it sort of set the stage for the one you'll see that Liberty and I have done subsequently. So, we can move on. And I won't go into this because I think we're too short on time, but the bottom frame here is the one that was, this is the mannequin defectors are walking past this mural. And I recognized when I had to draw this mural in the comic strip form, how little I knew about the women who really have done things in medical fields or astrophysics or so forth, and how ill-informed I was, and felt that really I needed to make a real mural of scale that was all women, and that is connected to the workshop that we did yesterday, that we will be adding another panel to this ongoing project. That we have done 7 panels for the National Portrait Gallery in London, and then we've done 2 for the World Economic Forum and so forth. So it's an ongoing mural. It's called Work in Progress.
And we've got some of these, we've got time to talk through these, which we should, because I think in a way the more I think about this and sit with these projects and have the pleasure of joining in on 2 of these workshops now, is the threads that come through. So yes, it kind of, you go back, you're just dealing with the Sergeant Pepper thing. Like, it is, here it is.
Yeah.
There were like 4 women, thanks to me. John Lennon wanted Hitler, like it was chaos, and you had to kind of sort out what was happening here. Yeah. And then you've revisited it to make this kind of a more equitable scene. But since then it's taken on its own life, but collage remains a theme. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is something, for me, the threads of the earlier practice, these is another kind of transition point in some way. Yes. And so I think the work in progress, and it's also collaborative between you two, as well as with all these communities that you work with. So I think we have a few of these. So talk us through this. Yeah. And
so this is the first 7 panels of the Work in Progress mural, and you'll see in the bar there is a panel that's on vinyl, which is just a repro of the original that Liberty Collage that is all paper. So the workshop, briefly put, is that you take a piece of paper and it has a photograph on it, and the photograph is then cut into a stencil, and you stencil the image that is the photographic subject. And most people can do this within a few, a half hour of instruction. And then Liberty collages those into an 8-foot by 4-foot panel, which is 1.24 meters by 2 meters or something like that. So the collection here is based on women who have done things that they're catalysts for change in terms of the sciences and the arts and advances that are social, sort of social needs. At this point, it was 7 panels, and it was really done in 2016. We thought it would be a celebration of Hillary Clinton being the first woman president in the United States. And alas, it wasn't, and it suddenly changed from the celebration to a barricade as far as we were concerned. And it's been showing regularly ever since in different places. It's now 24 panels. The workshop that we just did will make the 25th panel and take it to over 100 feet long, or 30 meters, 33 meters, I think.
And just to say, so the faces the kind of stenciled images in the background are by and large, they're all by your non-expert communities. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The full-size figures in the front, you are done by professionals.
Yes, for the most part. Yeah, the front row figures. Again, it's that thing of you in the workshop. You only have to create a head because you're tiling it, and the front row figure is covering the fact that none of those have bodies. So yeah,
it's an extraordinary experience to have you there teaching us. And Bettina and I both made one yesterday, and it is. I mean, there is something very joyous about working with other people, and all of us feeling so nervous and vulnerable and embarrassed and anxious to start with. It was just a very interesting process, wasn't it? Just
it's a sewing circle. Really?
Yeah.
It's like a quilt making thing. Yeah. And there's something that happens that Libby and I have commented on and seen again and again. When you're using both hands, it looses stories. People start talking in a different way to one another. And it's really interesting as a kind of moment of psychology that, that whether it's the corpus callosum communicating right-left brain or what's going on, it things that come out of the workshops that are really interesting family things.
Really, really special. Okay, so here is
the
National Portrait Gallery in London.
Yeah, they wanted one that was concerned with English people that were in the collection at the National Portrait Gallery and women. And so the mural reflects that, an English-centric collection of women. And then the people in the workshops were allowed, we usually have them pick who they're going to do. And in this case, they were asked if they have somebody that is not in the collection, could they write a little piece on why that person should be in the collection? So it's not entirely reflective of the National Portrait Gallery collection, but they are in the collection now. And
it was shown, so when the National Portrait Gallery reopened after a huge renovation project, there it was on that first wall as you came in, and it was really powerful to have this collaborative kind of project.
And it's best sitting on the floor because, again, the body size is, your body size to the image that you're looking at. You're part of that mural in that way. So, And this is one I've just finished in Denver, which is a celebration of the arts in Denver. And these are all people connected with the arts. And it's massive. Big one.
And these are painted, so this has been...
It's done as a collage, and then they blew it up. So
yeah, it's extraordinary. And we have...
And then Dennis Hopper. I knew Dennis because we both showed at the Robert Fraser Gallery, and he turned up again in Sundance at one point, and we met again. When I met him, he said that he'd done more art in his life than acting, and that he really wanted to be remembered as a photographer. And so this is, the mural happens to be next door to a wonderful kind of photography supplier in Salt Lake City called Picture Line. And there he is as a photographer. He's going back in time, so it's reflection on reflection. It's him as the older Dennis Hopper, then the cowboy, then the high school student, and then the lenses keep getting smaller, and the smallest one is just a half an inch, and it has an egg and a sperm in it.
So the cinema again, right? It's another theme that's running through here, and I think with these large pieces here, we've got we can see, I don't know, it's all coming together, right? We've got the mural, we've got the cinema, we have the people said, what are we looking at? This is another hugely scaled
lens is appearing here again, and this is a work that was commissioned by a bank in Salt Lake City, and the film strips, I've done those. It's another one of the repeat things I've done, and I like the idea that you can do little frames of the film. They're little vignettes, so it's an insane project, this one, because it has like 460 little paintings of different film images that are films that are connected with Utah and with the Sundance Film Festival. So it goes out of Utah through the festival. Tragically, the film festival now is going to Colorado. We're all very unhappy about that, but it is a major event, or has been a major contributor to culture, the Sundance Film Festival, and it's truly international. It's a tragic loss for us. And these are film strips again, black and white films.
But the cloak's back as well.
Yeah, back to the cloaks.
There.
Yeah. So, and again, it's. I get the idea and then I have to do it. So there's all these little paintings.
And this is kind of a relief as well. These ones we see kind of mounted on the wall, but they're not framed, are they? They are just...
It's as if you could wear them, it's an implied. And this show was called Out of the Rectangle, so it was kind of busting out of the square.
We have a couple more recent pieces again.
That's another set of donuts. This is classic donuts, sort of classic design. And then a salon hang of that makes a figure. I just suddenly thought, oh, that's a good idea. I like the idea of art sitting down. So she's sitting down, sort of tired.
So these are actually hinged, these pieces, aren't they?
They're hinged and then and hanging separately, like the head. The head hangs separately, but it would be such a nice thing to explore these, a salon hang with, different figurations. I think. So, and this corset, I think, is kind of. I probably won't do more corsets now, because I wanted to float in the middle of the room, and somehow the Gazelli gallery managed to make that happen, which is just lovely.
It is, yeah.
And I've always wanted to do a painting that had a front and a back that you could walk around, and so there's a back to the corset as well, and it just floats. It is, so anyway.
Where did the corset? When did you? Why the corset?
Well, I was thinking about constraint, and making a corset that you stretch over stretchers. It's the opposite direction of the corset itself, and it's about the inhibition that women have, embraced, basically, and so the idea of that forming of the body and that restriction and so forth. I mean, all of that, and the fact that cloth is the source of corsets and so forth.
And the Richard Linden reference, which was there from his paintings, and you've made the sculptures of the Linden dolls,
yes,
as well. So I think there's that kind of
Richard Linden was a friend, and I adore his paintings, especially his early ones.
We have some of those works there.
I hope you have some questions.
Yes, we have. We have come to the end of our presentation, and so comments, questions, thoughts for Jann, please. I think there's a roving mic, so Bettina will bring that to you so we can hear.
Anybody with questions? Can I see
or
no
not?
hands?
Were you the first woman to use sewing in international art?
Sorry?
Were you the first person, the first artist to use sewing in
I don't, probably not. I mean, we were just at the Leopold, and there was this huge figure sitting on a couch that is a sewn figure that, damn it, predates my work.
Her sewing, was that before yours?
I don't know.
That was later. That was much later.
Yeah, and Kusama is, she's, the same sort of period. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's probably just the emergence, from the war and things like that women began to be more evident in the art world, Yeah.
I mean, I find it fascinating, this needle and cotton, this sewing, and then the powerful sculpture.
The wand.
Wow.
Very small wand. Yeah.
Thanks, Willie.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you so much for coming.
May I ask you one question?
Yeah.
You said something, I had to write it down so I quote you correctly, but he said, once I think of a form for an idea, and I thought that was a very sort of interesting way of phrasing it when you were talking about the donuts. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering, were there any sort of other forms? I know hearts, maybe. I mean,
you mean for the well, it's no. I think that the idea and form, the idea comes first, and then what I try to do is to think of the best form to do that. So it could end up as a poem, which there's a poem on that figure, or it could be cardboard or whatever. But yeah, I mean, for something, then the idea just goes off in, I mean, there's so many directions for a corset or for donuts. Mm-hmm. So a donut can be square, or it can be a heart, or as long as it has a hole in the middle, it's a donut, so, yeah.
I noticed that with the hinges as well, because you were, I mean, that's the sort of title where you gave this. We didn't really see that, but you called it the hinge points. And And then, there were the hinges on one of the last pieces you showed, and then I was looking at this here, and, so you can see there are certain things, and the film strips, that sort of horizontal.
I think it's a thing of creation, creative activity that, in a way, you almost plug in an idea and then it proliferates. And it will proliferate around that point. I always think of Herman Melville when I think of that he plugged in white in this incredible chapter in Moby Dick, and then everything that's white comes to his mind, we're very good computers, sort of everything is, will come from the idea once you hit something that really means something to you. I think it ignites, so, yeah.
Anyone else with a question? Yeah.
Hi. I would like to know what impact the women's movement and feminism had on your work.
It's a tough question for me, because in California, I had no idea I wasn't equal. you know, I mean, all my professors or teachers, they treated the boys and the girls similarly, the same. You know, we got the A's, we were in the discussions, and, you know, so it was coming to London, I suppose it began to occur to me that things were kind of different. The structure was older, the patterns of social behavior were different, that women didn't talk as much, or they didn't, you know, kind of speak to subjects that the men were discussing. But I think I was slow to pick up on you know, the problems of femininity and being a female artist. I still am, really, you know, that I don't believe it's there, you know, even though I've been a victim of it, you know. So it just seems so illogical to me. And so class and gender, it just wasn't a thing in California in my life, you know, or racial prejudice, you know, it just wasn't that present, you know. So, but I mean, I think, you know, I felt the rebellion in terms of, well, all these men are making these sculptures that are supposed to last forever, and I don't see that I need to do that, you know, that's what they do. I'm going to do this. If they're going that way, I'll go that way. But that's true of lots of things. I mean, if there were a lot of women artists going that way, I would go that way. It's a natural impulse to do something different than what's the normal thing. But I mean, you know, the feminine rebellion, I think I felt most in terms of the apology I felt I needed to make in 2003 for Sgt. Pepper. And that's really where the mural stuff started taking off. And I've never seen myself as a muralist. I mean, Libby and I have just backed into it accidentally, you know. So, yeah. Thank you for the question, because I think it's something I can't resolve, you know, what my position is. But I think your response
is quite familiar from that... from the 60s, from other women who were going to art school, particularly in London, who were just
they had no reason to bust out.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And there wasn't a language of feminism or politics at that point that you could say, oh yeah, this is wrong, this is what I'm. Right. It was everyone was just trying to make their own way, and I think it's something happens by the late 60s into the early 70s, where that generation have got a language to attach to the behaviours that they're experiencing that are, of course, sexist, but were accepted in ways by your generation. I mean, you were one of the only women in the art school at that time, or in your studio, I think, and that's a common story.
There were women there, but the quote that kind of amused me at the time was one that I said to a tutor that I wanted to get credit to take back to America, because I thought I was going back to America. And I said, do I need to present a portfolio to you, or, you know, work that I've done here, photographs of work I did in the United States? And he said, no, not really. He said, you know, basically we don't need to see the portfolios of the women students, just their photographs, because they're here to amuse the boys. So, and I kind of interpreted that, thinking that was a really stupid thing to say, but also that, oh, he's an old duffer, what does he know? That's not the real world, nobody else thinks that, you know. So I'd love to say I, you know, had the flag in my hand, but I don't think I did. I think, you know, it was something that, you know, my mother was an artist, she was successful, duh, you know, so, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Hi. I wanted to ask a little more about the sculpture that is actually in the room.
Oh.
Because it's quite a luxury to have one here. And if I remember correctly, it's titled The Artist. So I wonder whether it's a self-portrait, and if that is correct, whether you can elaborate a little bit on that.
It is a self-portrait, in as much as all of the pieces in there are from the work I was doing at the time, between 2003 and, I don't know, 2005, 6, something in there. I was pulling all the pieces of art together. So there's all sorts of little things in it that are referential to different paintings. And it's when I began the layered paintings. And I suddenly just felt I needed to make a three-dimensional figure. It is, the idea is that it is a self-portrait, not figuratively, but in some ways, and that I just love the idea of her head being in her lap, that she's sort of thinking about her head or something, you know, it's sort of the idea of her being headless and film strips coming out of her head and so forth just seemed to, you know, kind of be the way I felt. So it's pieced together, and it doesn't have an armature or anything like that. And it is kind of representative of different sewing techniques, but also of the work and the scraps that were in my studio. So a little bit like the Lee Krasner thing, that, you know, strips that are put together that are refuse, as it were. There is a tradition in quilt making that you keep the cloth to make the quilt, but sometimes there's cloth that's too small to use, and it's a string of cloth, really, and they're called string quilts. And so the one we had earlier, the old lady had string crazy hired man behind her, and I love the idea of, you know, like pieces of string that are too short to use that you keep in a jar labeled, you know, sort of small pieces of string. So, yeah. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering about something regarding the soft sculptures, and I thought that in most of the images that we saw, the soft sculptures are usually singular figures. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned in the beginning that you were interested in that sort of relationship between viewer and sculpture and sort of sharing a space.
Yeah.
And what came to mind now is, have you, and it might just be that I don't know your work well enough, but that would be interesting to know, have you ever thought about, or did you explore grouping figures so that the question of intersubjectivity is raised in between the soft sculptures themselves and not just in relation to the viewer and the soft sculpture?
Yes. The first show that I did at the ICA was The Old Lady and Frank and all these different sculptures together, flowers and so forth. And then I've kind of re-upped that in various other exhibits, either redoing those two together or you know, the dog with another sculpture. And I quite like that. Yes, I very much like the idea of the things going together like that. I think, you know, you're right to point out that most of them are singular. So you're walking up to a sculpture and or the snake lady, and you are equal with that person. So it's you know, shocking or odd. I mean, the sculpture frightens people because you go into a room and you catch it out of the corner of your eye and you think it's a person there. So you have that moment of kind of being startled by it. And I don't object to that. I quite like the fact that you know, you have a physical reaction to it. But yes, and I love the idea of a group. I wanted to do a sewing circle of old ladies at some point, you know, that were making, I don't know, knitting a man or something, you know. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I have a question that is probably related to David's question about Snake Lady, because you talked about that you really enjoy the soft sculptures to be sitting or to be kind of leaning somewhere, mm-hmm. and the Snake Lady is actually standing. And it's also kind of important once you enter the room that you have this Snake Lady on like your eye level or even a bit taller than you are. Yeah. So my question would be if so would she ever sit, kind of?
I don't think she
or can.
Yeah, she's pretty stiff, legged and so forth. And you'd have to break the knee or something to get, you know, to get the curve to work. But because she probably wouldn't sit, would she? Because I mean, she's too dominant, you know.
It would completely change the sculpture, right?
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah. She's not a sloucher, and nor is the sorceress either. I guess they are dominant women, really, you know. So, yeah.
But Because you still call her like a soft sculpture, right?
Yeah, and I think it's the idea of the temperature of the sculpture too, that it feels warm like a person does. That it's important to me that you have that connection. It's about connection, a lot of it, because it's approachable. It's comparing your size to it. It's you're in the same world as she is, or she's in your world. So it's very much a kind of relationship. I guess that's kind of female thing.
Probably it would drive all conservatives crazy.
Yeah.
You are allowed as a curator to decide whether the snake lady sits or stands.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you both for this discussion. It's the row of art historians asking questions now. I have a little anecdote relating to Sina Hansen's paintings, which are hanging next to the Snake Lady in the exhibition.
Yes.
Upstairs, I think, from here. And I went to Braunschweig to see a Sina Hansen exhibition, met her daughters, who were very happy when they saw the exhibition photographs of their mother's paintings next to the Snake Lady.
Oh.
And trying to write on Sina Hansen, I noticed that she also was described the way that Jo just referred to your work, like doing something that nobody else was doing in this way, and that people kind of not being able to place it. It also this also came to my mind when you were talking about not feeling like being properly placed with pop art as a label, because Sina Hansen is also labeled pop art. And I was just curious how you feel about people writing about art historians not being able to place you and kind of always saying like, you're the only one doing this, what is this about?
Well, it's kind of like sitting on a fence, isn't it? It's like, being American in England or female in a kind of male art world and doing the wrong kinds of materials to be taken seriously. So kind of, maybe I'm my own worst enemy. I don't know. and I suppose, to me, it's the art. I'm just, focused on that. And, I have to follow what the idea says to do it in, even if it's, not going to be very popular. I mean, I'm doing some cardboard pieces now, and I keep thinking, God, I need to make some money, and I know these won't sell. So it's, shoot yourself in the foot.
But you can't really make, art with money in mind.
No, you cannot. You can't. Well, you can. And there's so and so and so and so and so and so. Don't get me started.
We have time for one more question. So, is there anybody else who wanted to talk to Jo?
So nice to be with you this evening. Thank you.
If not, then thank you so much, Jann and Jo, for this conversation, which was so interesting. I always learn new things. Also, thank you very much to the audience for coming here tonight. And please join us on the other side of this room for some drinks. Thank you.
Thank you.